So, Sam Ghosh, in terms of who I am, well, I am made in Britain, made in England, so to speak, but I come from a lineage or heritage of an Indian background. My parents came to this country in the 60s for a different and better quality of life back then. And had a family. They've passed on, leaving me, and I am now married to a woman of 26 years. Her name is Debani, and she's originally from the Bengal, Calcutta area of India. And so she's very much part of my Indian heritage, having had an introduced marriage some 26 years ago. Career-wise, I was a student of Northumbria University, but I did a placement working in Leeds, and I loved working in Leeds or living in Leeds at that time as a young 19-year-old. And once I graduated, I came back here, and my first and main job after leaving uni was West Yorkshire Police, because I'd always wanted to join the police from an early age of about 13, 14. And that's where I've now coming up to 29 years service with the police service. What's my kind of travel history in this great country of ours? Well, my mum and dad firstly came and settled in Golders Green, Hendon, in London, where my father worked for the railways. And then we moved out to Luton. I have no recollection of that because I'd have been a baby. And then we left Luton when I was 15, 16 for the Midlands. And then from the Midlands, I went to university in Newcastle. So steadily working my way up from the south up to Newcastle. And then, as I say, loved working in Leeds as a student for a year and fell in love with Yorkshire and came back to living in Yorkshire, Leeds at that time. Career-wise, well, that was a line of tribulations for myself, as often happens to second-generation migrant children or children to migrants, that the expectation's quite high, and no more less so than my mum and dad, particularly my father. Mum was much more understanding, but my father was reasonably educated himself and had this image that wanted to keep up with other households, and that was very much based on profession and education. Unfortunately, educationally, I wasn't overly good. Some of that was because not everybody can be academic, but some of that was perhaps how schooling was in Luton at that time, where I know my early memories of school was going to school where I was segregated with half a dozen African Caribbean kids and Asian kids, made up 10, 12 kids, and that was schooling until my father twigged that my reading and writing was below standard. I remember him relating the story, going up to the primary school then, stroke junior school, speaking to the head teacher, and that was the educational policy in the 70s of putting Asian and black kids together. Why? Because it was deemed English wasn't our first language, and they had to go slower for us. Well, that may have been the case for some kids, but some of us could speak English. We weren't means tested. We weren't set tested. So that may have had some correlation to my development. I don't know. I could be just lazy. But then as I grew older, I had a calling toward discipline, uniform, a sense of purpose, public sector, and all sounds very much out of a brochure, but I thought I could do something purposeful in the community. Of course, that didn't sit well with my father, because in his eyes, he wanted the doctor, the dentist. The difficulty was I wasn't going to be able to be those things. So I kind of kept it hush-hush and played along the university gambit with him just to appease what he'd wanted at that time. And then, of course, when the time came of looking at a career, 13, 14, I toyed with the military. But then when I realised you have to sleep outside in a tent in a cold mountain without a hot blanket and hot running water, I poo-pooed that very, very early on. And then I thought about the police. Again, uniform, discipline, sense of purpose, all the things that one would hope is ethically right and morally right at that young age. So I set my stall out to research what the police career entailed. Then it whet my appetite through the research, the reading I'd done. Of course, back then there were no initiatives like positive action that the force does now. So it's all kind of self-induced learning through the library, through knocking on a police station, very daunting, and saying, "Can I speak to an officer, please?" So I progressed with that until the time came. I had to apply as an undergraduate on my final year. Broke the news to my father, who wasn't happy. And he said, "Look, if you join the police, I'm severing ties with you." You can keep relations with your mum, but I don't want anything to do with you, and I'm not even sure that I want you in the family house anymore. You're going to have to fend for yourself. Now, I thought having his moment, he was a strict father, he was having a bit of a moment, called his bluff, joined in secret, then I told them, and the bluff actually was reality. He said, I want nothing to do with you. So one of my earliest memories, just anecdotally, just as I'm speaking to you, relay my story, is that out of the 180 recruits that I passed out with from West Yorkshire, North Yorkshire, Lancashire, Merseyside, Greater Manchester Police, as a regional training school in Bruges, Warrington, or Bruges in Warrington, not Belgium. At that district training school, out of the 180 coppers that passed out, I was the only one without family. And that would always be in the back of my mind, that everybody else was rejoicing, families were there, clapping hands, all that sort of stuff. You know, the horses are there, the band is there playing. Those things don't happen so much now. It was a case of not being represented there by family. Although others rallied around me, which was a nice thing. A nice man. I still keep contact. He's still in the force. Said, Sam, don't worry. I know your mum and dad aren't coming tomorrow, but mine are. You can share mine for the day. And I always remember that to this day. And then gave his mum and dad a hug the next day. I actually have a picture of that at work, adopting his parents for the day. So how did I end up in Leeds within the West Yorkshire? So West Yorkshire are 5 primary districts as geographically. So we know those to be Leeds, Bradford, Wakefield, Kirklees, and Calderdale. So when you apply to the police, you have a choice of which kind of district you'd like to go to as a preference. And I opted for Leeds. And I fortunately got Leeds City Centre at the time. It's formerly a police station called Millgarth, which is unfortunately not there anymore. It's a John Lewis, but that's where I got posted as my first posting. I've got to say, thereafter, from joining the police, the roller coaster ride, that although I didn't join, in the days of the 40s and 50s. I joined in the 90s, but some of the stuff that we talk about today in historical times was quite rife. You know, at my training school, one of my experiences was at Bruges. Coming into my room, it was turned upside down. My personal possessions were on the floor. Some religious artifacts, because I'm practicing Hindu, were on the floor, and on the mirror, in my toothpaste, the letters KKK were on etched on the mirror. Did I report it? No. Do I regret not reporting it? With the hindsight of time, yes. But at the time, you just think that's kind of life, because I've experienced some adversity in Luton through growing up as a kid, through experience from teachers, from peers. So that was, for me, you roll with the dice, if that is an expression. And sometimes you can't fight every battle. You acquiesce, you get on with it, and so on. It's funnily enough, actually, over a period of time, those events used to go on at Bruges, and the BBC got wind of it. And after I left, some time after I left, I've got to be honest, the BBC sent in an undercover reporter who went in as a copper, who filmed and recorded, and that program became quite legendary. The Secret Policeman, that exposed staff thinking, coercing, allowing, behaving, as well as other students, in a derogative, discriminative, hurtful way towards black and Asian staff community. So that was an expose. I remember at that time I getting a letter in my docket, and the letter said, and it was hand signed by the chief constable at the time, whose name escapes me, saying, if you have anything to report. The letter went only to people of minority descent, ethnic minorities, through that period of time. And the letter read something like, if you need support, counselling, or anything to report, come forward. And of course, I duly didn't, but that's the sign of the time at the time. And yeah, experiencing, this is the 90s. This isn't 1920s. Opening my locker to see keep police white. For racist language, which I shan't repeat because I appreciate I'm being recorded. But the P word my senior officer to describe a shop in front of me, and 30 white eyes peering at me, thinking, "What's Sam thinking with that?" Um, uh, yeah, keep police white. In my helmet, the P word written in there, P man, go home, and all these things. And now I'm of that place that with the positivity of good experience as well, because the ones I'm painting are the negative things, right? But in 29 years, it's given me a livelihood, it's given me a career. I like to think of it being a platform to have this little small house, a small holiday once a year. You know what I mean? A family. It's given me all those things. That's not me pandering to what the police has given me. I have to contextualize it. It's not all been doom and gloom. I've worked with some wonderful, wonderful people who would be the first to stand up by my side as I've stood by their side in conflict, in difficult, scary moments, be it public order, football matches, stuff like that. So it's been hand in hand, but those people still do exist. And that's my message to the force now, where I do cultural awareness training. So I can talk a little bit about that the cultural awareness training that we've embarked on as an organisation was the Chief's vision. Our Chief Constable, Mr. Robbins, he wanted and addressed the imbalances, particularly how we fail various communities, of course, but how we fail particularly black communities of West Yorkshire who feel over-policed and underprotected. And there's all that historical stuff about stop and search and what goes on in bias and conscious bias and all those sorts of things. And coincidentally with him having that vision and wanting some training to address that, the Home Office must have been having that same thinking, because the Raise Action Plan came out from the Home Office that stipulated to 43 forces, you need to get your act together. You need to have various changes. Here's the 55-page document, template on how you're going to do that, or what we advise you to do. And in all of that is training, which is the role I'm in at this moment in time. So myself and two other sergeants, we have the large task of getting through 10,500 staff, ranging right from the chief who's led on it, he's come on the courses, the other senior brass that's in the organisation, both police officer and police staff colleagues, coming on the course, and we spend 2 days. First day in my hands, second day is external company, of trying to eradicate, train, understand some of those difficulties, that legacy that is sometimes past trauma. You know, these communities that settled through the Windrush generation and our forefathers who had those trials and tribulations, they would sit around the dinner table and relay what's happened to the child. And if the child then going to school having negative images and negative connotations with the teacher, and then listening to music that calls it out in a certain way, then picks up a newspaper or watches the telly where people that look like him is already the villain and the bad person because the media says so, with all those contextualized things, and then they look and they see certain communities flourishing and they're told that they're only going to be at the very lowest of the low, if at all, if not crime, then that legacy is still playing out. And you don't need much to then, when they interact with a copper who has certain images and certain mindset, for those two discussions not to perhaps go accordingly. So I don't have control over the mindset of the young ones out there and that generation from whichever minority community, but I can plant the seed with my colleagues. And that seed is simply this: regardless of all the stuff that's going, it is about what is it about this great institution I work for that's taught me, trained me, and given me so much. What is it about in my psyche that rubs off on me? That when I see a black man of a certain age, of a certain build, at a certain time of night, walking a certain part of Leeds, why am I thinking in my head, what's he just done? What's he just about to do? Will he be aggressive when I speak to him? Where does that come from? Because I ain't thinking like that when I walk a leafy suburb of Sandal or Old Woodley in Leeds, or Sandal in Wakefield, and where it's leafy. Where's that come in my psyche? And of course, the flip side is it that when that young black man sees a yellow jacket walking toward him at a certain time, at a certain place, at a certain location, he's thinking, sugar. Why didn't I stay at home? Should have got the earlier bus. because this copper's going to rumble me and give me a hard time. So if he's thinking that, but he may have had that on real life experience himself, or it's passed down to him from somewhere. If he's thinking that, I'm thinking what I'm thinking. When the two of us meet on the street, could that sometimes not go according to plan? And that's the crux of our training. Because I can't really train someone to think differently. I can just say, be aware, it's okay to acknowledge your thoughts. It's what you do with them. So to delve into the realms of recruitment and how we reflect society, well, I think I can quote the chief who says, I'm very proud and I want West Yorkshire Police to reflect the society that live on us. And I think probably most chief constables would say that. So here's the dilemma, right? Because if we're recruiting from the very roots of the community, by virtue, when we dredge up 10,500 people, and those are trying to get in through the door, there will be a few, and I like to think it's still a few, of the ones that hit the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Now, that's not me saying damage limitation. That's not me saying that's okay. Where we need to be, in my humble, lowly level that I am as a practitioner, where we need to be is, of course, have vetting and scrutiny and interview and assessment centres that can try to weed some of that out. But running parallel with that, where we need to be is the organisation can be able to identify. And once identified, it's what we do then. And it can't be this rigorous kind of, long investigations, protracted. An officer isn't dealt with because it's too hard to do box or whatever it may be. That joined up process has to come. It is very much coming and is there, but if I'm very, very honest, the hurdles to become a copper aren't the same when I came into the organisation in the 90s. Not at all. And that may not be an organisational stance for the organisation to agree. So I'm talking as Sam Ghosh, who've gone through this process, that when the time that I came in wasn't full safe. It wasn't completely eradicating the wrong type of ists, okay? But the hurdles were there. That I had to go to an assessment centre, an interview, another day for a medical, another day for a fitness test. So these are all times I'm going onto police premises and being watched and observed and heard. Not perhaps now where the interview can be done over Zoom or sometimes it's just an interview in the assessment centre because it costs too much money. We don't have it. Well, those were 5 assessment centres, 8 stations where somebody would be reading something, go into a room, have an assessor, often a copper, a police staff colleague trained to assess. So 8 opportunities for that person to come out with under stress, terminology, mindset, values. We're not checking that now. So one can say it's all about finance and resources, but the trade-off will be then we will get people that maybe the public aren't in the best interest of the public. But now that's how it is once we have identification of those people, what do we do? So going back to those what I call full fat racism, like the full Coke, right in your face, between the eyes, it's what it is. Now it may be the diluted diet Coke type version. Let me quantify what I mean by that, is that then those things, if they happen now, I have no qualm, would be stamped on. And I have to believe that, and I do believe it, and we have examples of that being stamped on. I'm an advocate of that. It's what we do now with the micro aggressions, the micro bee stings that add up to something else. So it's not the P word written on the mirror or in the locker, it may be more subtle. That's the challenge now of recognizing it and having the processes to not always get the victim to complain. That's the change, I think, in the force. And that's what we're moving to, certainly from our training and the organisation, to what's often known in new languages, allyship. But it can't be just victim-led. Because the victim's the one, if they're the victim for being the woman on the team, or being the person with a disability, or being trans, or person of colour, it's hard already for them to come forward and say, excuse me, can I just stop things? I want to make a complaint. We know historically that's difficult, right? So we need to be in a place where if I'm seeing you're experiencing it, you and I do something about it. It's depending what lens you've got to use to view it, right? I accept, some people will be blinkered in their views, but that's the battle for the community as well, isn't it? Coming into professions that aren't normally ours or seen as ours. So my understanding of where perhaps the learning in the main for me needs to be for us as a service, delivering a service to the people of West Yorkshire, is that sometimes amongst all sorts of changes, sometimes communities would appreciate us more, I think, when we get things wrong, to be transparent and say we've got things wrong. We're very, because the nature of the work that we do is so easy, isn't it? Oh, sorry, that's under investigation, we cannot comment. Oh, that's a sensitive thing, we close out. Oh, no, we draw ranks and so forth. Well, I get all that, but the person in the street just sees rank and file, a uniform, shoulder to shoulder, and it's them against us. And I think that is probably changing and needs to change more with more speed to say, we got it wrong. Why can't we just say that as a public body? Am I oversimplifying it? If we'd said something we got wrong, maybe the legacy of a 18-year-old kid blading out on the streets of London 30 plus years ago, that legacy would have played out differently. Umpteen inquiries, umpteen speculations, umpteen trauma to a family, to a community, to a nation because of Stephen Lawrence's death. Rather than someone at the time say, do you know what? We got it wrong. 2 of our officers didn't do first aid training. There's some bias going on there. They've got to be reprimanded, disciplined or whatever. We've got to learn from this and make it not happen again. What would have been the ramifications? Now, if that's one pebble in the pond, how many more pebble opportunities have we missed? And it's endemic of the organisation I work for. We're humans, right? Why don't we just say when we get things wrong? That I should have, I could have, I'm sorry. This is why I got it wrong. It's that trauma legacy is passed on so easily. So easily. In the same way I'm fearful of dogs. Why? That's come from my mum. I have got no kind of evidence why I shouldn't like dogs. Apart from trauma passed to me from my mum, who was bitten as a little girl in India by a street dog. So I don't like dogs. That's her trauma on me. I know I'm oversimplifying it, but if you have that ripple effect constantly, what is the change? And that's got to be transparency and openness to say sometimes we get things wrong. So David Oluwale is somebody I've grown to know, respect and admire. Not because he came up with the cure for cancer or the theory of how to get to the moon. That what he, in a dignified way, what he went through, that experience in the late 70s is something that we teach now. Because it was never taught at training school. It was never taught at Milgarth or spoken about. And I worked there, admittedly some years beyond. There was no memorial for him then. There's no nothing. For me, his life story is twofold. One is that he was let down by a number of people. The very people that should have helped, whether it be the NHS, housing associations, the local authority, and of course underpinning a lot of it was the police interactions, the very agencies. And I think that's why some of the work that you've been researching today, that legacy of let's not make those things happen now. Let's talk about those things happening now. Let's have a better understanding of mental health. That's ranging across the board, isn't it? Isn't it just? But when you transport that into the Black and Asian communities, we've got an extra layered taboo, haven't we? That is to say, we don't talk about these things. That's why we don't engage counselling. We don't engage going to the GP who could start things rolling. Why? Because the vilification. You know, I know I'm stereotyping, but in the Black communities that I work and know, Asian communities that I work with and know will say, "Oh, evil spirit in here." That's mental health, right? Not schizophrenia or bipolar or all those things that are on the disorder spectrum. It's all, you're possessed. You're not right in the head. Who's got to come forward with that? So even if the agencies are ready to embrace, and I do think, not that I've worked for the NHS, but I do think the NHS and other authorities and statutory and voluntary organisations are all geared to receive people more so now than ever. But are they coming through the door? What's that barrier? And I think some of that is our community. Deep entrenched. What is mental health? What did they used to do? Not that long ago, from the subcontinent, from the Caribbean, stories that I've heard is literally lock and key, right? Lock and key, shock treatment, rituals. What's the word? It comes to mind. Black magic to get rid of that evilness. No, they need a support care plan. That may be medication, it may be counselling, it may be all the things that I as a cop don't have that full understanding of, but I know who to ring now. And the young cops know, and I say young not in a disparaging way, young in-service cops, that they, in their training now, which I know about, will have a repertoire of contacts. They have that training that you as a copper may not understand where exactly that person may plot on the spectrum, but know they're on the spectrum. And use your device to find the right number, the right contact, to put a report in or ring. And of course now you'll have seen on your travels, I'm sure, mental health nurses going out on duty with the coppers for that early intervention. Early kind of diagnosis of, oh, this is Sam. Oh, we know him very well from our systems. Sam, you haven't had your medicine this month, have you? Because the prescription hasn't been, yeah, sorry, nurse, I haven't, yeah, right. Is that the reason why you're behaving in the way you are? Right, and that was never something that we did, because we, as the cops, didn't understand it. We understand threat, risk, and to have to mitigate that, what would it be? Arrest. Not necessarily the softer side of what policing is, but we're not the experts in it, so we work with the experts. And that's a really refreshing thing. I think, if not every division, but most of the divisions, and this is coming more online, that I speak to colleagues out at district police stations, that mental health services, those nurses and doctors are working in collaboration based in police stations and based in the patrol car. Maybe one a shift, attached to a shift, to give that early triage. So my current role in the force at this moment in time is that I work in the faculty that's called management training at our Learning and Development Centre in Wakefield, basically our training school, training academy. And there, I, over the last year, with another colleague of mine, whose heritage is of a Jamaican descent, he and I, we were given roles within the training school. I used to look after police support community officers and new student officers. Those are the programs. But as I said earlier, with the Chief Constable's vision of something more current in terms of cultural awareness training, he and I were set on to devise some program that every copper, every police staff colleague, regardless of rank or grade or service, would come on. So that's what I've been delivering the last year. We've looked at the black communities firstly, because they're the ones that are crying out that we are getting things wrong, for all the legacies, things that we've spoken about. And this is what we often refer to as phase 1. Phase 2, which I'm actually just now in the early stages of drafting, consulting stakeholders internally, externally. We'll be looking at South Asian communities, because they are a big community as well with West Yorkshire. And for us, it's all about every community is important. Every human being is important, of course, but where's the understanding lacking? And when we get things wrong in certain communities, we know there can be a backlash. So to eradicate that, be it the interaction in custody, be it the interaction over the phone, be it just a general understanding of what those communities are, where the legacies have come from the feedback I'm getting for what we're doing now, it's really positive. Of course, I would say that because I've designed it, but proof in the pudding has been the comments, the chief, and down, of saying we pretty much got things right. And our journey with the officers is first and foremostly, and I say this in my open introduction, I mimic one or two who are sat there, arms folded, spread-legged. I don't need to be here. And I say, let's get that elephant out of the room. Because I know some of you are feeling like that, but I ain't here to big stick anyone, to lecture, to patronize, to say you're all ists. You've had enough of that. I'm just going to have a chance to have a discussion with you about things that in the workplace we don't get a chance to talk about. And that is then built on through the day. And looking at the tribulations that this community has in this great country. They didn't just disappear overnight. They're not just the immigration problem from wherever they are. These were part of the British establishment that ranged across the world for 400 years, that came on invite to the motherland. Where do you go? You look for your mother when you're poorly, don't you? When you've grazed your knee or bust your nose, fallen off your bike, you look for your mum. So England was the motherland, because you can't have it both ways. You can't go to these countries and say, we're your mother now, by force or whatever you've used, and say, be a part of us, instill the language, instill the law, instill everything. Let's take some of your resourcing as well back to the motherland, roll the clock on 200 years and say, come, build us back up. We need people to work the NHS. We want doctors and nurses, right? Who said that? Enoch Powell, when he was health secretary. He changed his tune afterwards, though, didn't he? Come from the Asian. We need doctors and nurses, and we need bus conductors. We need people to row the road. Come. But all of a sudden, come to what? No Irish, no blacks, no coloureds on guest houses and bingo halls where they had periods of time for play for just for white people, and black and Asian people come at a separate time. Is that what it is? So that legacy of why people here we go through, and I go through the slave passage of time, because when I was growing up in the 70s, what was history? History was doing the Great Two Wars, brilliant. Doing the great kings and queens, brilliant. Romans, straight roads and viaducts, and Egypt, pyramids. But funnily enough, I can't remember one session that looked at empire, commonwealth, and the slave industry. For 400 years, that got stepped over. And what was the backdrop? Running in parallel with that, image of Africa being reported as being primitive, needed educated. They are savages, mud huts. Hang on, and I tell the students, Africa was leap years ahead in astronomy, in science, in medicine. London in the 14th century was the biggest developed city, right, in Europe, with 35,000 inhabitants. Well, we had 80,000 in multiple big cities. Now it's going through a difficult time because of modern politics. But that's the thing, and people just look, wow. And the punchline for me, when I show a little bit of a video of what the atrocities were, and I say, this isn't about white bashing. I use that term right in the face. This isn't about us feeling guilty in this room about what our ancestors did. It's about having that acknowledgement and understanding that every black person living in this great country of ours, from one of those 28 wonderful countries that make up the Caribbean, is a direct descendant, has lineage to that darkened passage of history.